Alright guys, it's Noah here with Custom RC Mods. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Rustler rebuild series. Now if you didn't catch episode 1, we basically took this Rustler completely apart. Every single screw has been removed, all the way down into the transmission. We took apart the planetary gear diff, as well as the other gears. Even into the shock bodies, I removed all the oil. And we're just going to have a fresh start with this car. But first we have to get it all cleaned up. And that's the focus of today's video. I'm going to try to get all these parts looking as good as possible, and maybe even as good as new. And hopefully they'll function better because of all the dirt and grime being removed from them. So yeah, a few things I did off camera on here. First off, I went ahead and soldered up an XT60 on my battery and my speed controller. And that's just going to be good. My charging and battery ecosystem pretty much is all XT60 for my airplanes. So I like to use XT60s on here. I even use them all the way on my micro quads that are like this big. So we're just going to stick with that for these projects here, as well as I went ahead and did some work on my radio system. It does turn on properly now, and that's because I went ahead and fiddled with my battery compartment and got rid of some of the rust with sandpaper, things like that, as well as I went ahead and fished out the broken telescoping antenna, so at least we'll be able to get good performance out of it. It's going to be a reliable radio system, and it feels good in the hands, even though it's a little bit older technology, so I'm pretty happy for this thing. And I also went ahead and obviously tested all my electronics now that I was able to get the battery charged properly, and they all work fine. Even this motor was performing great, even though the previous owner told me that the motor could very well be burnt out. So that's good. Servo does work, even though this is easily the most grimy, piece in this entire car. There's so much dirt and stuff all around this thing, but I'm imagining that's just because it was so concealed under the upper chassis right in here. But thankfully, we don't have to worry about that anymore because, of course, we're going to clean it today. Now, the first thing we're going to touch on today is the main plastic pieces. So we're going to take the transmission gears and all these smaller pieces and set those off to the side. I'm going to take all these plastic elements right here, the chassis, upper chassis, transmission case, the arms and shock towers, things like that, here on this tray as well as around here. And we're going to head over to the shop sink and get these things all cleaned up. So I'll show you guys how I do that now. Alright guys, so we're over here at the sink now. It's time to go ahead and clean these parts. And I've got the main plastic pieces sitting on the shelf over there. We're going to go ahead and wash them in the sink, and then I've got a towel set up on the ground for them to air dry out as well. So let's go ahead and just start off by getting this sink filled up with about 3 or 4 inches of water, just enough to completely submerge all the parts. Alright, so we're here, we got about 3 or 4 inches of water, and I'll usually just go to the length of my fingers or so. And now I've just got some dish soap right here. This is just basic Dawn antibacterial soap. Just, give it a little swirl with that in there. And this is where we're going to obviously get our soap, but we're going to be using sponges today. So I'm going to go ahead and get my sponge in the water, and that's going to obviously make it so that it's nice and soft. And this is going to be nice because it's going to get into all the little corners and cracks. It's not necessary to get all the really tough stuff out of there, all that grime. It's more just to loosen everything up so it will come out when we give it more attention if necessary later. Like this transmission box, first off, it has a bunch of grease in there in the corners as well as, up here. And I don't think my sponge is going to be able to fit in there. However, at least the water and the soap is going to go ahead and help that get loosened up so we can go ahead and give it more attention later. So let's go ahead and mix all this soap around in here just to try to get the best use out of it possible. I'm also like to put a little bit deep into my sponge, just so the sponge is always having a little bit in it, and you can see I just rub back and forth with my thumbs just like that. And now it's time to go ahead and take our first part. Let's just do it. So first things first, I'm going to take my upper chassis right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and get it wet first, and then I'm going to take my soapy sponge and just go ahead, go over it with some soap. Just all around it. The more attention you give it, the more chance for it to look nice there will be. But obviously this isn't a very abrasive method of cleaning. Here it's basically just rubbing it out. There's not that much grit in the sponge right here. So I also have this piece right here, which is just basically a sponge with a little bit more of a gritty texture to it. So if I really need to go over something and get all of the grime off of it, which this doesn't really have that much dirt or like lasting grime, then I'm pretty good to go here. So we're just gonna go ahead and finish up just with this sponge. And this one thankfully isn't that dirty of a piece, but I'm mainly just trying to get all the little potential places where there'd be dirt in these little cracks and things like that, trying to fit my sponge into the corners. Just to get this clean. So now we're going to go ahead and rinse it off. Just like that. And there, our first piece is ready to be dried. Alright guys, so now that all the parts have been washed and they're drying right here, I'm going to go ahead and speed up the air drying process with just a simple hair dryer. You're not going to use like a heat gun or anything. That will probably melt the plastic, especially on the smaller parts. But we're just going to use it on the warm setting on high, and you can use an air compressor if you want to as well, but I think this is just a little bit easier to do. Just go ahead and get that water all off of these different little parts. Alright guys, so we're back from washing the main parts, and as you can see, these are looking really good. Most of the ones on here are looking just about as good as new, with exception of course to like scratches and things like that. But in terms of color and just overall look, these are really nice. The chassis also turned out really good. There's a few scratches and labels on the bottom that I'm going to remove with Goo Gone off camera, but other than that, this thing is really solid. Of course the upper deck looks nice, as well as the bulkhead. The one thing that I'm going to go ahead and throw in with the detail pile is the transmission case. There's just a lot of grease on the inside and grime on the outside. There's obviously a lot of little like crevices and things like that all around this thing, so we're going to go ahead and give it a little bit more work in there. But all these I'm going to go ahead and set off to the side, and we're going to focus on the smaller parts in the organizer. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and move the transmission pieces off to the side. That's what we're going to address after the smaller parts from the organizer. But basically, these are small plastic pieces like the axle carriers, the half shafts right here, as well as the caster blocks and the front axle carriers as well. So we got those. I'm also going to go ahead and clean off the spur gear. Don't want to mix up my organization. As well as the shock bodies, just like that. And the caps, body posts. Then of course also the steering bell crank system does need a little bit of a touch up as well. Alright guys, so I've got a wet paper towel. We're going to go ahead and just clean these parts the best we can, wipe them down as they are. And that's going to be the basic first thing we do. Of course, there's a lot of little parts here, so it's going to take a little bit of time. But if we need a little bit more precise movement, I have some cotton swabs right here, some Q-tips that you can use in the corners, as well as, if you really needed to, just toothpicks or the tip of a barbecue skewer can be used to kind of get into these corners like of the half shafts, just like go in between just like that, and go ahead and clean these pieces out that are a little bit more intricate. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm also going to go ahead and touch up the transmission case with these cotton swabs and toothpicks there as well. Alright guys, so I just finished up cleaning up all of these smaller parts. That is that, and we're finally almost done here, but easily the hardest part here was these half shafts for the drive shafts. You know, these ball joints were just kind of hard to clean, but thankfully I put in the time, and you can see they rotate freely, which is going to put a lot less load on the motor as they try to, you know, move around with the suspension. So that's really good, and they're going to slide in and out as the suspension is compressed and relaxed. So yeah, we also cleaned out the transmission case. It's looking pretty much spotless, even on the inside there as well, so that's good. And you know, everything else is pretty self-explanatory. One big thing was that original 2055 servo that was super grimy before this is now looking pretty much spotless, good as new. Besides, this wire has a little bit of grime that I couldn't get off with the rubbery compound of the installation. But yeah, it's really looking nice. So I'm happy with the result on this servo. Even though you're not really going to see it, it's going to ensure better operation and longer life out of the servo right here. And also, of course, did the receiver, ESC, and then I wiped down the motor a little bit, made sure the solder joints were good, and yeah, that's pretty much it. All the electronics are looking good as well. So now we're going to go ahead and clean all this stuff up, and we're going to finally get to our last segment, which is the transmission gears, where we clean those out. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do for this video is focus on the transmission gears. Now, the idler gear as well as the diff case that were originally on this are not going to be used in the rebuild because these are made out of plastic. So imagine just as, as soon as you add some brushless power on here, these things are going to be toast. So we're going to get some steel ones. I've got them on order with the rest of my upgrades for this car that I've got right out of the gate. So we're going to mainly focus on the internals for the diff, the planet gears, and the solar gears, as well as the drive gear and shaft right here that I just dropped. And yeah, we're going to clean those out. We're going to take a toothpick and go through each one of these, just each of the teeth, get it right nice and clean the best we can. The more time you put in this, the longer the gears theoretically should last, and the better lubricated they will be for better performance for the rest of the drivetrain. So yeah, that's going to be really nice with those. I'm also going to clean off the bars and other little pieces there. Now for these bearings that hold the transmission together, thankfully this model does have bearings rather than bushings, but we're going to be using some 3-in-1 penetrant oil right there for lubrication. It's going to get deep inside past the rubber seal and hopefully make these run a lot smoother. So I'm going to wipe them off with a paper towel, add a little bit of this oil, and then wipe them off and clean them off from there. And that should be pretty much where we need to go. And then we can obviously go ahead and rebuild the diffs and things like that in the next video. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that right now. It shouldn't take too long. And then I'm also going to go ahead and do a few things off camera, like clean up the body as well as do the tires. So yeah.
Thank you. As you do.
Alright guys, so that concludes this episode of the Rustler Rebuild series. Everything is all clean and done. Of course, we cleaned up the transmission and the bearings. Everything is looking good over there, as well as I cleaned out the inside of the rims. They're really dirty, but I didn't clean out the treads because, of course, that'd pretty much be in vain the next time I go run it. They just get dirty again. So yeah, everything is clean, of course, and some things didn't really even require any soap, like the smaller parts, but all the soap I really had to use was just dish soap, and everything is looking pretty much good as new. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, all we're waiting on now is just a order that's going to be coming in for the metal gears for the transmission and a few other things that are going to be needed to get this thing completed. But other than that, like I said, this thing is going to fly back together, and it's really going to be such a great RC car. I've got some upgrades coming down the pipe as well. Also some in the mail, some that I'm ordering very soon for this thing, and you guys can probably just dream about what they are. Basic Rustler two-wheel drive upgrades that are really necessary to get the full potential out of this vehicle. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys for 400 subscribers. Just reached that last night. Really means a lot. Please go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.